So just a couple days ago, I spoke a little bit about the TNT Championship and how that belt has been pretty much destroyed and ruined by AEW. And obviously, that's just my opinion. That's not, I'm not some sort of expert or whatever. It's just my personal opinion. I think when I watch AEW and I see how valuable that championship was in the beginning to what it is now, it is clearly not a good championship belt, in my opinion. But that's not the only championship belt that I feel that has been ruined. In fact, actually, I think WWE has managed to do much worse with the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship belts. And it's such an unfortunate thing because when Vince McMahon was running the WWE, it just kind of felt like random, right? Like it kind of felt weird that they introduced it considering they didn't have any women tag teams. But nonetheless, they try to make it work. Sasha and Naomi were very credible names holding those titles, but these belts weren't part of major storylines. These belts haven't been part of big matches. There was really nothing going for the title belts. And then when Triple H kind of goes into creative, it becomes this thing where I'm thinking, yeah, Triple H, he knows what he's going to do, and he's going to do something great with these things, and that's exactly what the women's tag team division needs. But then I kept thinking a little bit more and more about what actually is the women's tag team division, because when you look at the main roster versus NXT, NXT actually has a women's tag team division, and what ends up happening is some of these people get called up to the main roster and they're brought in as like singles people, which is very interesting choice. But that basically tells me the WWE doesn't really value these championship belts. And, Damage Control got brought into the company and that was really cool. That was like this really like, okay, cool. Like they're going to do something with the women's tag team division. Then we saw them lose the title belts relatively quickly. And it's just such a strange thing because Triple H has actually managed to, when Vince McMahon dropped the ball with the women's tag team division, I thought Triple H would pick it up and at least run for the 50-yard line, right? I'm not saying score a touchdown, but I thought maybe he would run for at least the 50-yard line, 50-yard gain. But that obviously didn't happen. And it sucks because the issue is not the talent, and the issue really isn't the booking. I mean, yes, the booking is part of the issue, but fundamentally, when you look historically at pro wrestling, there has been such a great list of tag teams that existed, but we haven't really seen that happen in the women's division. Naturally speaking, in the WWF, WWE, I mean, we saw Edge and Christian, Team 3D. We saw, we saw Too Cool. We saw the Hardy Boys. We saw so many different tag teams throughout the years. Even more now recently, the Usos, the New Day, Imperium. I mean, there's so many great tag teams out there. But these are teams that they've managed to put together or they were naturally put together. You don't really see that happening in the women's division, which is actually really unfortunate because I think the idea of Ronda Rousey and Shayna being a women's tag team could be really helpful for those tag titles. I think there's a lot of people that you could put them together and make them successful as women tag teams. WWE doesn't have a mid-card title belt for the women, but they do have these women tag titles, but they don't really have true women tag teams involved for these belts. And not to mention, because they don't, you got to mention this part, right? They don't have a whole bunch of these tag teams for the women's division. So naturally, what you're seeing is makeshift tag teams being put together, like Lita and Becky Lynch, which obviously there's a storyline there. If you watch my main channel, there's some major plans that have leaked. And those major plans don't really include those women tag titles. In fact, it involves Trish Stratus and Becky Lynch. So the thing is, even the big feud that's going to come out of that right there has nothing to do with the women's tag titles. And basically, that just means the women's tag titles aren't the forefront of it all. And I think that's a big issue. And I look at the way WWE books these women tag titles, and it sucks because they have such a great, talented roster. They have a lot of women that are really good. In NXT, I mean, you're seeing some really cool stuff with Fallon Henley and Kiana James, but it's almost inevitable that they're going to split off. JC Jane and Gigi Dolan, great tag team. They split off. It's hard to say what the hell their actual plan is, but you can't be breaking up some of these tag teams that are being put together, right? And WWE NXT historically has this thing where tag teams break up because they turn on each other. It happens all the time, and it's such a stupid thing, but for some reason it just works, right? But you can't do that with the women's tag team division because the women's tag team division doesn't really have legitimate competitors on the main roster. So when they broke up Gigi Dolan and JC Jane, I mean, those two individuals could have gone to the main roster and been part of the women's tag team division, which is great because at the end of the day, as much as I think Gigi Dolan and JC Jane have potential as singles competitors, they need to fill the void right now of women's tag teams. There's not really a void of singles women's stars right now. So the thing is, they've kind of made this choice to like not push women's tag teams and not put women's tag teams together. And that's always going to be my concern with the WWE's Women's Tag Team Championship belts. I think these are probably the worst tag titles. No, these are the worst championship belts in WWE history. You can complain about the Hardcore Championship or the 24/7 Championship, but it had its role, right? It served a purpose. And WWE was getting a lot of social media views because of that. The social media impressions, the 24/7 championship being defended on television, the 24/7 championship being defended at live events, the 24/7 championship being involved in digital exclusives, or even, Peter Rosenberg doing like a radio interview or whatever it was, where he drops the belt and then R-Truth. It was comedy. And depending on how you look at it, it was good comedy or bad comedy. But the thing is, the championship belt was always on TV. It was always being talked about. Triple H came in, the 24/7 championship was gone. Dana Brooke actually wanted the 24/7 championship to become like a women's intercontinental championship, which honestly wouldn't have been that bad. They could have just easily replaced it. But the thing is, if you're the WWE, how do you introduce a mid-card title for the women's division if you still haven't perfected the booking for your women's tag titles? And that's kind of the thing that like I feel in WWE, in AEW, before you could introduce new championship belts, you got to make sure the booking around your current championship belts are spot on. And I feel like that's something that just hasn't been the case. And it's like, and it's so unfortunate because look at the championship belts that have been taken off TV in recent years. The Cruiserweight Championship got merged with the North American Championship, and like that to me was like a big mistake in my opinion. I know not everybody's going to agree with that, but like the Cruiserweight Championship, especially right now with Triple H running WWE, I feel like it would be massive because there's just a lot of guys who we know realistically they're never going to be able to go for the World Championship, right? It's too crowded. So having that Cruiserweight Championship could have been super beneficial for a lot of people who aren't on TV, and you could have built a division. And that's the thing I do like about like MMA and boxing. You have championship belts for weight classes, and I get it. It might not work in pro wrestling, but each championship belt has a select amount of guys that can go for those belts, and that's it, And if they choose to go for another belt, they have to jump up in weight. I don't think that necessarily works in WWE, but it could work, right? With the Cruiserweight Championship. Like, if you want to push somebody out of the Cruiserweight division to potentially go up into something different, maybe you don't do the weight class thing, but you can't weigh more than 205 or whatever it is, then you can move them up whenever you're done with them in the Cruiserweight division. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's ways to do it. And historically, WWE has shown us that, like, certain titles don't mean anything. We saw that with the Cruiserweight Championship. The only difference is, right now, the women's tag titles, they're still on television, but there's really no prominent focus on that. And it's a weird thing. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm very curious to know.